This scientist has collected evidence of the independence of our consciousness from our own brain, and in doing so, he opened up new worlds, where some people even managed to visit. Practically no one in the world has done so much to unite the views of scientists and representatives of various religions. What is life and what is death? What awaits us after death, and where will we find ourselves after it? Perhaps after watching this video, you will become less afraid of death. David Kuhl followed a direct path to his main discovery. While still studying at the University of Pennsylvania, specializing in nuclear medicine, that is, using the results of nuclear physics, he developed a new method of tomographic imaging, which allowed him to obtain much more information and clarity about the work of the brain. At this university, David became a doctor of medical sciences and completed his residency at the university hospital. David continued to work on creating images of the brain and developed the PET positron emission tomography method. Many people have heard about CT scans, even if they are far from medicine. PET uses the radiation of particles similar to electrons, but with a positive charge. This method allowed us to see how the metabolic and chemical processes in the body work. This has significantly improved diagnostics, especially in neurology, oncology, and cardiology, and has also helped to develop new drugs for the treatment of brain diseases. PET allowed for the recording of clinical death in patients who later revived and reported having vivid experiences. Even when the brain ceased to function, something, what scientists currently refer to as consciousness, was still active in these individuals, and in a very unusual way. With the help of PET, scientists were able to record the moment of clinical death in patients who then returned to life and told about vivid experiences. Although their brains stopped working, something that scientists still call consciousness continued to operate, and in a very unusual way. In esotericism, this is usually called the soul. Some even say that there are special spaces where souls live. Esotericists call them subtle worlds. Physicists also use this term, but they clarify that our familiar three-dimensional world is a dense world. In science, the existence of the soul has not yet been proven. Therefore, David and his colleagues were not talking about the soul, but about consciousness, which continues to exist even when the brain is not working. This means that consciousness does not depend on the physical activity of the brain. It can be assumed that the brain can work not only in our material world, but after death, it collapses along with the body. Nothing remains of it. It turns out that consciousness is not related to the work of the brain. It is believed that the mind and intelligence are the result of brain activity. Does this mean that consciousness has nothing to do with the mind and intellect? These are the inconvenient questions for scientists that David Kuhl's PET method has led to. An unexpected side effect. Consciousness did not just function in the inactive phase of the brain, but all those who experienced this moment noted an increased awareness of what was happening and their actions. Nevertheless, all scientists are unanimous. The recognition of the existence of consciousness outside the body is a truly revolutionary discovery, a consequence of David's ideas. Medical practice has changed. Medical professionals, realizing that patients in a near-death state are capable of surprises, wait and prepare for these surprises, providing such patients with special care. The methods developed by David allowed us to study the relationship between the experiences described by patients during clinical death and brain activity. When he started visualizing the brain, he wasn't just studying how everything was interconnected. He was trying to figure out how to resist death. He spent a lot of time talking to incurable patients in the hospital, wondering how their perceptions and experiences changed as death approached. He also communicated with the families of the sick, because they were the first to notice changes in loved ones. He collected unique information about how the condition of patients changes during illness. Separately, he studied transformative experiences that were deeply spiritual. This allowed us to identify three groups of such experiences. A feeling of lack of time. Worries about the past and the future disappear, leaving only the present. This is a complete change in the perception of time. A deeper dive into the present helps to better understand the interconnectedness of everything in the world. Changing the angle of view. The patient begins to see things from a broader and more comprehensive perspective. There is a feeling of greater clarity and understanding. The disappearance of borders, the boundaries between a person and the world around them disappear, and there is a sense of unity and interconnectedness, not only with other people and things, but also with the universe. Does mindfulness persist with a non-functioning brain? PET-T allowed us to capture the moment when the brain stops working. Combined with the patient's accounts of what happened to them, this led to the conclusion that consciousness does not depend on brain functions. Their descriptions were very different from those of fear of surgery and other previous experiences and anxieties. This is what happened to people when brain activity was minimal or even absent. People met with deceased loved ones, came out of the body, seeing it from above, and moved through light tunnels. If they were in a state of clinical death, then they experienced deep experiences, enlightening, changing them. When it became clear that consciousness could function independently of the brain, the question arose, does human existence really end with the death of the body, and especially the brain? This forced science and religion to look at the problem of life and death from similar positions. Questions related to who people are, why they exist, what life is, whether there has always been a living world on Earth, whether space is intelligent, all this has also become important. The answer to this question brings science closer to the most fundamental questions about life and being. And the answer turned out to be yes, and each time the evidence became more convincing. The role of a person's mental state at the time of clinical death. It seems that for a dying person, it no longer matters what mood he is in. But those who have experienced clinical death say that the mood at the moment of death is really important. When a person thinks about forgiveness, cares about loved ones, reflects on his life, he changes significantly after he returns. He begins to perceive spiritual issues, the importance of communicating with people in a different way, and changes his life values. Sometimes you can say that he is reborn, becomes a different person. It makes us think, who are we really? And how are our body and consciousness connected? About the relationship between consciousness and the brain. David conducted a study not only of the very moment of clinical death, but also of the conditions that occur before it, when brain activity has almost stopped. This has helped to better understand how consciousness and the brain are connected. It turned out that consciousness is not something permanent and unchangeable, but it can change and take on different forms depending on the characteristics of a person and his condition before death. Many people said that they were rushing through a light tunnel and someone saw a bright light at its end, while others did not enter the tunnel but immediately found themselves in front of the gates of paradise. It turned out that changes in consciousness can be associated with certain physiological conditions. For example, when there is too much carbon dioxide in the body, or not enough oxygen, it can disrupt the work of the visual part of the brain, and a person begins to see a tunnel or bright light. The bright light that some people see may be caused by bioluminescent biophotons that appear in the brain at death. At this point, the brain produces more energy-releasing molecules and free radicals than usual. These biophotons may be associated with unusual human experiences. However, not all people have these biophotons, and not everyone sees vivid images or light. In recent years, scientists have increasingly used bioluminescent imaging. Bioluminescence is a glow that occurs in living beings. When does a person experience particularly vivid and coherent experiences? This happens only during periods of minimal or no brain activity. This strictly established fact practically refutes the materialistic interpretation of consciousness as a product of the functioning of the neural circuits of the brain. It practically legitimizes the existence of the subtle world. Esoteric literature describes its structure, but it is enough for people to know that paradise exists and is located in the subtle world. The most likely theory at the moment is that consciousness is a kind of field structure. The brain interacts with consciousness as if it were a field, and partially influences this field by changing its parameters, taking into account the specific characteristics of the brain. Esotericists are likely to disagree with this opinion. They believe that it should be about the soul. According to them, when the soul leaves the body, it enters its own special world and can re-enter a new body after a while. And most likely, the brain cannot affect the soul. It is important that the idea of the soul as a field phenomenon allows us to describe it using the laws of quantum physics. This helps to bring together scientific and religious approaches to understanding man, consciousness, and the world. Physicists have already argued that this view of consciousness changes its role in the universe. It not only participates in the creation of reality, but also plays a key role. If earlier scientists said being is primary, now many consider consciousness to be primary. For scientists, this is a relatively new formulation of the question, suggesting a huge scope of activity in this field. Which world is the main one, invisible or earthly? A new look at consciousness raises an important question. Where is real life, on Earth or in another world, which can be called heaven or paradise? For us humans, the answer seems obvious, on Earth, because souls come here again and again in new bodies. So there is some deep meaning in this. Now we have a new question. Are we humans self-sufficient, or do we fulfill some kind of role for beings from another world? Almost simultaneously, the issue of independence arose, both for countries and for each individual. This topic has also become important in the political context. Is this the main question for a person? How should human sovereignty manifest itself? Of course, these questions are not for this video. They just show how many new topics have become relevant after David Kuhl's research. David opened a dialogue between theologians, scientists, and philosophers on the issues just mentioned. He united everyone. David made even ordinary people think about their values and beliefs, considering the topic of life after death. He provided a huge database of facts gathered from the stories of people who had been on the verge of death and beyond, and also compared their experiences with data on brain activity at that moment. In many countries, almost nothing is known about David. Until 1976, David worked at the University of Pennsylvania, then for 10 years at the University of California, and later at the University of Michigan. At the University of Michigan, he headed the Department of Nuclear Medicine and made it a world leader in this field. He remained a key figure in nuclear medicine until his retirement in June 2011. In 1981, he received the Ernst Young Prize in Medicine. In 2009, he was awarded the Japan Prize. David Kuhl's work has fundamentally changed nuclear medicine, but equally important, and perhaps more important, is that it has significantly expanded our knowledge of consciousness and its role in life after death. Modern researchers continue to study the complex connections between consciousness and the brain, following his discoveries. Two discoveries related to David are truly amazing: the independence of consciousness from the brain and the fullness of life after death. The first discovery opens up worlds that almost none of us knew about. You will have to explore these subtle worlds, get used to them, and find harmony in them. The second discovery is that rigorous evidence of life after death is no longer so important, as David has done everything necessary. But he didn't stop there. He, like many others, was interested in finding out what was going on beyond the pale of life. He researched it, writing everything down, doing it with respect, rigidly, and with real interest. And he found out that life becomes more meaningful and interesting just before death. The world seems to be expanding, becoming more meaningful and understandable. You begin to understand what it's like when all the senses are working at full capacity. When the light is brighter, the music is more picturesque, the smells are more intense, and all this is many times brighter and more saturated than on Earth. And then you begin to understand what fullness of life is. Do you think there is life after death? Write your opinion in the comments. If you want to learn more about life after death and the afterlife, then I recommend watching my other videos. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it. See you soon and have a nice day.